Between 2005 and 2015, zombie video games were everywhere. They were inescapable. There were plenty of great games, some mediocre ones, and some downright terrible ones. However, my personal favorite zombie game is Dead Rising 2.
You pee your pants yet?
My only experience with the first game was unfortunately the Wii port, which is truly awful and nothing like the intended version.
The Wii port of Dead Rising is exactly that, a Nintendo Wii port of Dead Rising.
However, the second game made an impact on me and is still to this day one of my favorite video games, despite the fact that it is horribly immature and has some flaws. So why do I love this game then? I think that this game is a great satire of Americanized culture. I must unfortunately invoke a word that I do not like to use. That word being capitalism. The reason that I don't like this word is because it has about 10 different meanings, and these meanings, differing from one person to another person, just leads to people talking over each other. Capitalism can refer to bad things, such as materialism, greed, and corporatism. But capitalism can also mean good things, like freedom, individualism, and voluntary exchanges between people. I try not to get political on this channel, so I will keep this to a minimum, but perhaps others can relate to my frustration. When people on the left say that capitalism is bad, I am inclined to agree with them when they are referring to materialism. But to me, it doesn't follow that because materialism is bad, that also somehow means that freedom is bad as well. Likewise, when the right says that capitalism is good, I'm inclined to agree with them when they are talking about freedom. But again, to me, it doesn't follow that just because freedom is good, that somehow makes materialism good as well. Dead Rising 2 is a game that both celebrates as well as condemns capitalism. It is a satire of it, but it is simultaneously also a product of it. It is brilliant, and the best part is that it likely was never trying to be. This game, quite frankly, is quite stupid.
More side quests while I waited for the next case to start, and while doing so, I accidentally gave a mere mortal the last dildo I had in my inventory.
But perhaps it is so dumb that it becomes genius. All of the characters are so over-the-top ridiculous that it is difficult not to be amused by them.
Oh, you love it! You love me!
But somehow, there's still something sad about them that makes it feel somewhat serious.
Now? Look at her now! Now she's dead! Dead! Because of you! You brought the zombies here! You ruined everything!
Dead Rising 2 has a very odd tone. It's not fully 100% comedic, but it's also not super gritty and realistic either. The game came out in 2010, and I think because of this, it has a strange tone for a zombie game. Before 2010, you had zombie movies like Shaun of the Dead, where it is just straight up comedy.
Oh my god. She's so drunk.
And after 2010, you had zombie movies like The Last of Us, where everything was super serious.
She's infected.
Let me see it.
I didn't mean for this.
Show it to me. Oh, Christ.
Oops, right?
And we can't even call the zombies zombies anymore, because we simply cannot have a hint of anything humorous in this super gritty and dark and realistic world.
I'm sick of these goddamn runners. Running around. If you do anything, kill as many of these damn joggers as you can. I call them walkers. 'Cause they walk.
This awkward middle ground between Zombieland and The Walking Dead is where Dead Rising 2 lies. I think that the odd tone of Dead Rising 2 is perfectly encapsulated by its protagonist, Chuck Green.
He's a hero! He's a survivor! He's Chuck Green!
On one hand, he is much more stoic and stone-faced
I always saw you more as the strong, silent type.
than the protagonist of the first Dead Rising, Frank West, who cracks jokes the whole game, as well as in the alternative version of Dead Rising 2, off the record.
Always thought you had a crush on me.
Too bad I don't dig flat chicks.
However, Chuck still has one-liners at the end of boss fights, like he's John McClane from Die Hard, so he isn't without his sense of humor.
I'm number one! Yeah, you're on fire.
Chuck also has a daughter that you have to take care of in the game. So yes, before Joel and Kratos, Chuck Green was one of the first video game dads. Now Chuck and Katie's relationship is not nearly as fleshed out as Joel and Ellie's, by any means. But I think this dynamic showcases how Chuck, character-wise, is somewhere between Frank West and Joel Miller. Sure, Chuck will run around the mall in a dress, but he will also do anything to secure his daughter's safety. The game's setting is also a character in and of itself. It is a Las Vegas type setting, and seeing all the zombies walking around malls and casinos is a very apt metaphor for mindless consumerism. The music is also pretty good. Most of the time, you'll be hearing elevator music, which has a pretty funny juxtaposition with all of the zombie noises that never ceases to entertain me. As for the boss fights, you will hear mostly industrial metal music. Fun fact, the band Cell Dweller does most of the music for this game. The aesthetics and graphics of Dead Rising 2 are also pretty good for 2010, although there is occasionally pop-up, lag, and some texture issues here and there. The only real issue I have with this game, however, are the loading screens. They are frequent and occur every time you go to a new area. The story of this game is that Chuck Green and his daughter Katie are in a place called Fortune City. He is there to participate in a gruesome game show where he kills zombies for money. He needs the money to pay for Zombrex, a medication which prevents zombification. Katie was bit by a zombie, so she needs a dose every 24 hours, and Zombrex isn't cheap. Then there is an outbreak, and they hide away in a safe house. Chuck is also later falsely accused of starting the outbreak, as someone in his motocross outfit released the zombies, and the news broadcasts Chuck's name on TV as the perpetrator.
Initial reports suggest that the man in the video is former motocross champion Chuck Green.
What?
From here, you have plenty of goals. 1. To make sure Katie has her medicine. 2. To prove your innocence. 3. To rescue others and bring them back to the safe house. And 4. To find out who is framing you and who really started the outbreak. The gameplay is pretty simple. You pick up whatever item, literally anything, and fight zombies with it as you go from point A to point B. Beyond this, there are other enemies, such as looters and gunmen, which change the combat slightly, but not by a lot. There are also survivors, which essentially amount to escort missions, which would be tedious normally, as no one really likes escort missions. However, they are kept interesting due to the hilarious caricatures these people represent. Some survivors also have interesting prerequisites, such as one businessman who won't go with you unless you are carrying a gun. Funny enough, for some reason, the game accepts a water gun as a possible solution, as if a water gun provides any more protection than going barehanded. I don't know if this was just an oversight on the developer's part, but I'm inclined to believe it is intentional, as the water gun is the closest thing you can find in proximity to the businessman. Regardless, it's little moments of rewarded experimentation like this that make this game fun and make me chuckle. And given how insane some of the survivors are, it doesn't even break your immersion in the slightest. These people truly are hopeless, and you quite literally have to carry them sometimes. It is like the game itself is making fun of the concept of escort missions while almost being entirely comprised of them. There is an old lady who thinks the zombies are just toys and is oblivious to the danger they present. There is a woman who was having a little bit too much fun by herself in a tanning booth and got super sunburned and missed out on the fact that the outbreak happened. And I of course must mention the fact that there is a rock band who thought that the audience was just really hyped for their show, when in reality they are ravenous zombies. It truly feels like Chuck is the only character with a brain in this world, which is why I prefer him over Frank as a protagonist. You need Alice's logic to contrast Wonderland, just as Chuck is the voice of reason in this undead carnival. With Frank West, he's a bit mad as a hatter himself, so he feels more like another one of this world's crazy inhabitants, rather than a level-headed outsider that makes a better vessel for the player. The aptly named psychopaths are the most insane residents of this wonderland. They include a mailman who's gone postal,
Neither rain, nor sleet, nor hail, nor zombies are going to keep me from my appointed rounds. I swore an oath, sir, and this package requires a signature!
a hippie who thinks it's best for everyone to become zombies for the greater good, but hypocritically won't become one himself.
So I'm helping now. I'm a soldier for the cause, man. No.
And of course, everyone knows Slappy, who is voiced by none other than Light Yagami himself.
Everyone knows Slappy, and everyone knows you! You started the outbreak! I saw it on TV!
Slappy, much like other people in the game, takes it at face value that Chuck started the outbreak. After all, it must be true, it was on television. This is an interesting social commentary on propaganda, as you get to play as someone slandered, and get to feel firsthand what it's like for everyone to have the wrong false impression of you based off of lies from the media. The survivors you meet throughout the game, most of them are hesitant to trust you, and you often have to prove yourself to them. And the psychopaths either believe the media wholeheartedly, or are at the very least happy to use your demonization as a post hoc rationale for their wish to kill you. Of course, this game is so over-the-top goofy, you probably won't be consciously thinking about these things while you play, but it is interesting to reflect on. The main characters are slightly less insane. There is Stacy Forsyth, who is the member of the zombie rights group known as Cure. When I first played this game, I thought to myself, LMAO, zombie rights activists, yeah right. But now, I'm 100% convinced that zombie rights activism would exist if a real outbreak occurred. Fun fact, Cure is based off of a real movement, a satirical movement, but still, interesting to mention, nevertheless. Stacy is basically your quest giver and gives you information. There is more of a utilitarian reason for her being in the game, rather than for story purposes, though she serves as a potential love interest for Chuck, and mother for Katie, which is cute. Another character is Rebecca Chang, who is a reporter set out on getting the latest scoop. She is driven and witty, and the best character besides Chuck, though I must say, this game has a lot of groan-worthy sexual moments and puns from Rebecca, and even more so from the twins.
I was hoping for a better ride from you, Chuck.
I guess they just didn't want it bad enough.
The target demographic for this game was clearly horny teenage boys. Thankfully, I was in that demographic when I first played this game back in the day, so it suited me perfectly.
The show must go on!
But despite this game's immature moments, I don't think that is enough to write off the interesting themes that this game has to offer. Playing this game again in the 2020s, I had the most we live in a society moment that I've ever had in my whole life. I noticed a poster, a Playboy magazine, which itself is already amusing. In the digital age of OnlyFans and e-girls, Playboy feels like a distant multiverse away. But then I saw the name, Donald Trump. That very image really cemented this game as being from a time period that no longer exists. Not to mention, this was during the pandemic, and Chuck was wearing a mask. It felt like one of those millennial memes with the Twin Towers about how the world you grew up in no longer exists. This was before the 2016 election, before Gamergate, and before the lockdowns. Something about all this really struck a chord with me, and I wanted to share that, but I must ask, should I feel nostalgia for this world? Is there something special being lost? Or should I say, good riddance? That era was vacuous and superficial, and it should not be missed. If I'm completely honest, it's probably a bit of both. That is what this game represents to me. This Las Vegas utopia is in one sense a brave new world full of aimless hedonism and materialism, but it's also a bastion of freedom in another sense. I can neither fully celebrate nor condemn it, yet this game does both for me. I guess I should probably talk about more gameplay though in a game review, so as I said, it's really simple. All you do is fight zombies and rescue survivors. But what keeps it interesting is the time management aspect. You see, Dead Rising 2 takes place in real time. Well, almost. In the game, a minute is 10 seconds long rather than 60, but within that frame, it takes place in real time. You have 3 days, in game time, to explore Fortune City. 4 days if you are going for the proper ending, which means the maximum game time is 12 hours in real time, and the game has to be beaten within that time frame. And the missions can expire if you are too slow. So for example, some missions will start at 6 AM and expire at 12. In this example, you'll have 1 hour in real life time to complete the mission. Of course, you have to juggle other factors as well. The mission could be on the other side of the map, making it inconvenient to go to right away. What if you have 6 survivors following you and you get a message for a boss fight? Do you risk bringing the survivors to the fight where they might be killed, or do you go all the way back to the safe house first and then go to the boss fight, wasting precious time? If you want to go above and beyond and attempt to rescue every single survivor in one run like a mad lad like me, you have to have a good grasp of the map's layout, plan efficient routes, and manage survivors wisely, while you complete story missions and fight psychopaths within the allotted time limits. Not only does the time feature make the gameplay far more engaging, but in a meta sense, I think this is also a commentary on the highly regimented and restrictive 9-to-5 work system. A system where people have to crunch numbers and meet deadlines. A system where pay is based on the time you've spent rather than the work you've accomplished. Where everything is strictly scheduled. Much like the idea of the busy mother getting off of work early only to efficiently complete 6 different errands on her way to drop her kids off at soccer practice. The fact that this concept was baked into a mechanic in a zombie video game is nothing short of brilliant. One huge complaint I have about this mechanic, however, is something the game doesn't explicitly tell you. Dead Rising 2's biggest flaw: the mission will not start if you are in the area that the mission takes place. If that sounds counterintuitive, that's because it absolutely is. If you know that a survivor will be at the Americana Casino at 9 AM and you enter that very casino at 8:59, the survivor simply will not be there at 9, or 10, or 11 for that matter. You must wait for 9 AM before you enter the casino, otherwise he will not appear. Once you know this, it's easy to work around, but it is profoundly irritating initially, especially considering that it means more bloody loading screens. Despite this, the gameplay is indeed fun. There are so many different weapons that you can use, and you can combine things to make creative wacky combo weapons for great comedic effect. And given the state of many games these days, it is nice to have a game that is unapologetically fun. Even Dead Rising 3 and 4 removed a lot of the fun aspects of this series. The environments also contain many secret areas, and despite the fact that Chuck is a bit clunky to control, there is a surprising amount of verticality to explore, and even a few platforming moments. You can also play poker in this game, which is probably the most funny survivor quest, because they won't follow you unless you beat them, and you can literally see zombies walking around through the window behind you while you are just casually playing cards. I thought this was hilarious when I first played the game. After all, who on earth plays poker while the world is crumbling around you? Replaying this in the 2020s though, all I could think is, touche game, well played. Now I'm playing poker while the world crumbles around me. It's even more hilarious when you get a call from Stacy mid-poker game to remind you, hey, by the way, your daughter's gonna die if you don't get some medicine in 3 hours. And Chuck's just like, "'Kay," and keeps playing poker. The poker game is not only a fun change of pace for the game, but also serves a thematic purpose. After all,
you gotta be willing to risk it all if you're ever really gonna.
Gambling is a major theme. You can gamble on the slot machines and play mini-games, and you're gambling in the regular gameplay as well. You can only carry so much stuff at one time, so you have to balance carrying a good amount of food, which can heal you, with the weapons that you need to fight the zombies and psychopaths. Money is the main theme of the game. Cash, products, and flashy casino games are everywhere, and it's hard to take 5 steps without seeing one of these. Even the looters have shops that you can buy things from. You'd think that money would be worthless when there are zombies running amok, but apparently not. Money is also the motivation of the villains. You later find out, spoilers, that a corporation let the zombies loose in order to drive up demand for Zombrex, and literally making a killing off of it. Reflecting on the themes of this game, much like with Infamous, I can't help but wonder if this game was just really accurate at foreseeing the future, or if these games are some sort of predictive programming. I don't like to devalue artistic merit by saying it's all government brainwashing or something like that, but the parallels between this game's story and real-life events of the last few years are at least worth pointing out.
I stole the laptop and took it back to the safe house where I expected to find some disgusting pornographic material, but instead found out that the anti-vaxxers were right all along and Big Pharma were behind the whole thing to profit from Zombrex sales.
I will also point out how ahead of the meme game Dead Rising 2 is. Chuck is a Chad. His name is so close that it might as well be Chad. Although, there is another character in the game named Chad already, then the villain's name is Tyrone, and of course, there is Stacy. So we have Chad, Stacy, and Tyrone, even way back in 2010. The meme goes back further than I thought. Tyrone King is also a living embodiment of capitalism, and it represents the true enemy that Chuck is fighting, materialism. I could be trite and compare Tyrone King to someone like Andrew Tate. He has a lot of bravado and humor, but is ultimately out for himself, and wants revenge on the system by participating in it and twisting it to his advantage, by being the ultimate player in this twisted game. Unfortunately, whenever you gamble, eventually you lose.
You gotta be willing to risk it all if you're ever really gonna win big.
Dead Rising 2 is a great critique of materialism, a world where the immaterial has been made immaterial, where everything is reduced to the most base instincts, crude sexuality, violence, and cold hard cash. It is a hilarious and immensely fun game that doesn't take itself nearly as seriously as my analysis does, but despite this game seeming quite dumb, there is something true in it that resonates with me. That is why it is one of my favorites, and why I believe it is the definitive zombie video game. Our acculturation continues as we ask ourselves, what's in a game?
Damn it! He got me!